Cabernet tends to be the sort of Errol Flynn of the grape varieties.
The most expensive beer in history.
People will turn around to me and say, I'm just making gin while I wait for my whiskey to get ready.
Because wine is an adventure.
Conventional winemakers who just condemn all natural wine as faulty.
The prestigious title of Sake Samurai.
Looking at whiskey in more of an artful culinary way.
They kind of look at it as a novelty more than anything. The guy from the rock bands is making wine.
This is the Drinks Adventures podcast. I'm James Atkinson, and this is the show where I speak to some of the world's most exciting producers of beer, wine and spirits and uncover trends and issues in the drinks industry today. It's a very special episode of the Drinks Adventures podcast as we introduce you to musician and winemaker Maynard James Keenan.
How does one choose words so magical? They terminate or alleviate.
Maynard is the frontman of celebrated American rock bands Tool and A Perfect Circle, and his own experimental project, Puscifer. But over the years, he's become increasingly renowned as a wine enthusiast and winemaker at Arizona winery Caduceus Cellars and its affiliated label, Merkin Vineyards, which he founded in 2004. We spoke a little while ago now, on the eve of Joe Biden's inauguration as president. It's a wide-ranging interview in which Maynard shares with you some of the winemaking projects currently exciting him at Caduceus, as well as his recent forays into making mead and cider. He gives you an overview of wine in Arizona, where the industry is still in its infancy, but showing a lot of potential with its expressions of Mediterranean grape varieties. Maynard reveals how he cut his teeth on Australian wine and became a huge fan of Penfolds, which you previously heard featured on this show back in Season 1. We talk about the untimely passing last year of Maynard's close friend, the hugely respected Adelaide Hills winemaker, Ochota, who Maynard cites as his biggest influence in recent years. And if you stick around to the end, Maynard updates you on Puscifer and how he's been coping during these strange times of the COVID-19 pandemic. All of the music you'll hear in this episode is from the brilliant new Puscifer album, Existential Reckoning, which was released in October 2020. Thanks to Maynard for giving us the nod to use them in this episode, which continues right after this. And also, beware, there is a language warning on some of these tunes.
Parallel, this path you travel.
Maynard James Keenan, thanks so much for joining us on the Drinks Adventures podcast.
No, thanks you for having me. It's an honor.
How was the 2020 vintage for you over there in Arizona?
We had a late fall, early winter frost that kind of singed quite a bit of the fruit. So we lost about 25% going into the next year. But a lot of other people around us that crop a little heavy, and the rainfall was not at all. So people were down for 2020 probably about 35% on average across the state. But we were fine. We were only down 25%.
Yeah, I read that it was a very hot and dry year for you over there.
Yeah, very, very.
Now, I'm going to assume that most of my listeners are novices when it comes to Arizona wine. Tell us a bit about the climate and terrain. How does it compare with other wine regions globally?
The elevation, if you're familiar with Mendoza and Argentinian wines,
yes.
Very similar elevation, so definitely wine is possible. So we're higher elevations. You'll have to make the conversion, but we're about between 3,000 and 5,000 feet elevation farming. That's how many extremes we have in the state as far as the farming. So very high elevation, cool nights, hot days, diurnal swing of quite a few degrees. Cools off nice at night. But the elevation is similar to Argentina, but the grapes that we're growing are more Mediterranean. So a lot of success with Garnachos, Tempranillos, Sangiovese, Negro Amaro, Sagrantino, Nebbiolo Barbera. Fun stuff.
It looks like there's a pretty wide variety of grapes being grown over there.
Yeah, I mean, we're a young region, so we're really kind of swinging for the fence in a way. Most regions in the state are just trying initially, of course, back in 82, 92, when some of these sites were first planted. Of course, first thing they go to is Chardonnay, Cab Merlot, maybe some Pinot, just because that's all they really knew to plant, right? But as time's gone on, people have started to experiment more. So a lot of different things being planted. Portuguese grapes, Italian, Spanish, Southern Rhone.
From my reading, there are two existing American viticultural areas or appellations in Arizona. Some of your plantings are in the Verde Valley, which doesn't have its own appellation yet, but I understand that could change fairly soon.
Yes, the paperwork's on the desk. We're just waiting for the rubber stamp. We crossed the T's, dotted the I's. And again, it's just been a waiting game. It's been 4 years sitting on the desk, but we're in a pile of others in a similar situation, just kind of waiting to get rubber stamped. And then we'll have the Verde Valley. So Wilcox in southern Arizona, Sonoyta, Elgin in southern Arizona, and now Verde Valley.
Has that been a challenge for you, not having a recognised appellation that you're producing some of your wines in?
Well, Arizona is the biggest hurdle of all. I mean, people just don't know what to expect from an Arizona wine. We're far more old world than we are new world. That's for certain. I'm finding a lot of challenges with Arizona is kind of what's going to end up directing, how we're making our wines. We have our wish list, we have our desires, but when you start looking at what your hurdles are instead, it starts to make it easier to make decisions, not just on what you're growing, but how you're growing it, how you're structuring your vines, when you're picking. All those kind of things also come into play because we have monsoons, we have late spring frost, we have hail. So how you're farming ends up having to be adjusted and when you're picking.
What about recognition of Arizona as a wine-growing region? Is it now becoming more firmly on the map for American drinkers?
I think it is. When we put things into contests, which are very subjective, but generally speaking, we do okay in national contests as a whole, not just my wines, but people, all my peers. When it's blind, we show up well. When people are just focusing on just the Arizona wines and tasting them, it's hard for people to wrap their head around stuff that they don't know anything about. For Psalms, there's no cue card describing what's in Arizona, right? So we kind of have to reinvent that here.
You've been at this now for, must be 16 or 17 years, I think. Are you happy with how your own wines have developed over that time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's still a lot to learn, and we're still really kind of finding our way as far as growing and what to grow. But our chops, we're getting our chops down, and we don't for fermenting grapes. You have that one shot a year to really get it right, and then you have to wait 18 months or 24 months to really see what your decisions in that moment, how they come out, how they pan out. But we've been experimenting now just in off season with doing things. I've been making mead in between the harvests just to keep that fermentation skill sharpened.
Where did you learn your trade of winemaking? Who have been the biggest influences on you?
Well, initially, you just kind of go toward the wines that you like, and you try to ask the right questions. So, for years, I had a couple of friends of mine in California on speed dial, as well as emailing Peter Gago.
He's a good man to have on hand. That's Penfolds chief winemaker,
Oh, yeah.
Peter Gago.
Yes, and Luca Corrado from Vietti Wines in Italy. He was a huge help when I had some questions. But I think the biggest, once you start to learn these things, and once you start to figure out what your hand does and your cellar with your fruit, with whatever's being provided to you by Mother Nature, I think the person who ended up helping me really dial it in was Taurus Ochota.
Well, I was going to come to
he
Taurus, actually. Yeah.
I think I reached out to him more than anybody else.
So you've got quite a few friends down here. How did you meet Taurus?
Ronnie Sanders, a friend of ours, through Vine Street Imports in New Jersey. He had introduced me to Colin and Taurus when they were touring around with Some Young Punks, doing a little U.S. tour. And we kind of hit it off.
How long ago was that now?
Oh, geez. I want to say it was right after, like 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
Oh, good God. I can't remember now. It's been a while.
I've seen some pictures of you popping up, in the Adelaide Hills when you've been over here on tour since then, I guess.
Yeah, because I'd had some of Taurus's wines, and I had a lot of questions. And he had one of my wines, one of the Caduceus wines called Premier Paso, and it's a Syrah with Malvasia Bianca in it, kind of a Côte Rôtie style, co-fermented red and white. And that really inspired. He's like, "Oh, we should do something." So we ended up doing we did a whole cluster Grenache from Adelaide Hills with a Gewürztraminer co-fermented in, and so it's been kind of a tag team back and forth on being inspired by each other's wines and then doing a collaboration.
Taurus Ochota, who founded Adelaide Hills winery Ochota Barrels with his wife Amber in 2000, passed away following a long illness in October 2020. What was so unique about him as a guy and as a winemaker?
I think he was just he was kind of that necessary step for Australian wines in the world, because as New World wines kind of caught fire and things started getting more oaky and higher concentrations and higher alcohols and just kind of like shooting up. He was kind of one of those guys that was pumping the brakes on manipulation and just approach and ripeness, actually picking earlier than most of his peers. And that just I think that was what really resonated with me, because I actually had the privilege back when before I owned a winery and I actually had some disposable income, as you've heard that story before. I actually had, I was able to buy some Penfolds wines, and I have now in the cellar, we have an Ian Foss that, that can read alcohol, pH, total acidity, Yans. It kind of gives you the breakdown on everything from, must to must under fermentation to finished wines. And we had a nice evening here. We were celebrating a big event, kind of a milestone for the family. And I opened up a bin 6A Penfolds, bin 7 Penfolds, and a 1955 Grange. And I put them on the Foss to see the numbers, to see what they look like. The total acidity was still amazing. The pH was still in check. And all of them were between 11.5% to 12.5% alcohol. I was like, okay, these wines are over 50 years old, 60 years old, and they're still drinking fabulously. And they were picked at a much lower Brix and much lower alcohol result. I don't know, it was very inspiring to me to see the actual numbers on a wine that was resilient and alive 60 years later.
Everything kind of comes full circle in terms of fashions, doesn't it?
Right, and I think that was Taurus's approach. He's like, I don't think we need to do these huge fruit bombs. I think we can actually create something very elegant that you can drink now and enjoy, but also lay it down if you choose to, if you have that kind of discipline. I don't, but lay it down, and it's going to actually age because of the pH and TA structure in that wine, depending.
I know you are a big Penfolds fan. How did you first get introduced to Penfolds?
One of my original manager, one of my bands, is from Australia, and he took me to a wine tasting at a restaurant near the office, and they were pouring a bunch of Australian wines, and it kind of set the hook for me.
I have to ask, have you drunk the 1998 Imperial Grange yet, or are you saving that for another day?
I was waiting to see what was going to happen with this election.
In 2003, Maynard paid 71,000 Australian dollars at auction for a 6-litre Imperial bottle of 1998 Penfolds Grange. Well, I was going to say, if you're waiting for a rainy day or an apocalypse, then you've had your moment in the last 12 months, surely.
Yeah. Well, we didn't quite get to that stage. So, still 24 hours to go. So we'll see.
What distinguishes the two labels, Caduceus and Merkin Vineyards? What separates, the wines that go under those two labels?
Initially, it was just Merkin was kind of the stuff that didn't make it into the blends for Caduceus. But as time's gone on, it's kind of moved to where the Southern Arizona site, we have 70 acres in Southern Arizona in the Wilcox AVA, and most of that goes to Merkin. And in Northern Arizona, on the much more difficult to farm sites, they're on slopes and on hills and can't really get machinery in. It's all hand farmed. Those grapes tend to go into Caduceus. So Northern Arizona is Caduceus, Southern Arizona is Merkin.
You've got a big portfolio of wines across the two labels.
Yeah, we can't sit still. Well, because all of a sudden you get like you've planted a 2-acre block of something like Chazal or Sagrantino or Aglianico, and you're like, well, guess I have to make a new wine because it's great on its own. So yeah, schizophrenic.
Say bye-bye.
You've got some field blends in there. What's the thinking behind those field blends?
Yeah, I guess field blend is the accurate description, but we kind of just been calling them a site blend because there's one site that I farm specifically for the Marzo wines, and it's the Marzo block, and it's Sangiovese Cabernet from that site. Sometimes a little bit of Barbera makes it in there, but just the combination of those two grapes on that site, Sangio and Cab, they're picked at different times generally. But what I try to do is hit the middle, where one of them's slightly under and one of them's slightly over, and we pick and co-ferment together.
I read an article by the wine critic Stuart Piggott in which he said that the 2014 Judith was the greatest single wine made in Arizona in modern times. Has it been gratifying to hear that sort of feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty flattered. I don't know that I agree. I think I can do better, but I think it's the site itself, the Judith site, is such a unique site that I could see how somebody that's pretty geeky, that understands nuance of site and of variety, I think that would, it's a site that certainly excites geeks like myself and Stuart.
And that's a Tempranillo wine, is that right?
Yeah, there's a Tempranillo on that site. There's we have Nebbiolo. I had Aglianico planted on it, a small block, but it wasn't quite keeping up. So I've replaced that with more Nebbiolo because I feel like that's that site for the expression of Nebbiolo outside of Piemonte. It's a great expression of Nebbiolo. So right now it's Tempranillo, one bottling of Tempranillo, one bottling of Nebbiolo.
Are you a big fan of Rioja, Barolo, Barbaresco, these sorts of European wines? Oh
yeah, to me, there is Nebbiolo, and then all other grapes fit neatly below.
Pinot Noir fans might have an argument with you about that.
Yeah, but, Pinot can have that at another table, not at my table. So I love the, I'm kind of big fan of Italian and Spanish wines anyway. So our region just kind of lends itself to that. A lot of volcanic influence in this valley, across the state, honestly. But the valley that I'm in, Wilcox, it was an ocean, completely underwater, and they actually had volcanic activity under the water. So the stratification of all the minerals and all the layers you can see throughout this valley. If you've ever seen photos of Sedona, so limestone along with volcanic influence. So it's a pretty unique setting.
Tell me about the reasons for forming the Arizona Vignerons Alliance, which certifies 100% grown and produced Arizona wines.
So, we'd been out when you're out in the market, you have friends that are out in the market and they're sitting at a restaurant and you see somebody order an Arizona wine on tap, or they've got something open at a bar or a restaurant and they have a bad experience with it because, of course, it's the stuff on tap. Nothing wrong with tap wines. I do tap wines, but we kind of saw that some people were having bad experiences. And when you hear somebody say, "Oh, I tried an Arizona wine. That was the last time I'm going to try that," but they're looking, they're not looking in the right place, first of all. And we just kind of wanted to do a little bit of certification, not so much to puff our chest up and be Tarzan, but more to set up some kind of hurdles to get the certification that you accidentally started looking deeper into your winemaking practices. So, for example, for the certification process, you have to fill out an entire JOT form. So you have to know a lot of things that you just should know as a winemaker. And if you don't know those things, shame on you. So we had a couple of people that were filling out the form going, "Why do I need to know that?" Well, see, we're already ahead now. Now that you know that you should probably know what the finishing pH is on your wine, those little things, when it was picked, what was the TA, what was just some of those numbers that you should be paying attention to see what challenges you're going to run into in the fermentation process, and therefore understand why it didn't go like you thought it was going to go.
The formation of the Arizona Vignerons Alliance was also about giving consumers confidence that if they buy a wine that is labelled as coming from Arizona, it's been made from 100% Arizona grapes.
Yeah, you can have in Arizona, you can fill in with a contingent state fruit up to 25%. So somebody could just get bulk wine or get fruit from California and put it in and still call it Arizona, even though it's 25% someplace else. And I don't know if you've ever gone through blending trials and trying to put things together, but 5% of anything added to another wine, it really changes the dynamic of the wine. So 25%, you're not really seeing Arizona now. You're just seeing a beverage. You're seeing an alcoholic beverage in a bottle with no statement about place. So, the alliance was more about, we want to make sure that we're presenting 100% Arizona fruit, not just because we need to establish our identity, but also in understanding how it's being produced and understanding all those numbers and all those nuances and flavors going in. And it's just completely undermined by bringing in bulk wine. Totally fine with bringing in bulk wine, but not if you're going to try to enter it in a contest to establish Arizona's identity.
So you could actually enter it in a contest for Arizona wines, competing against 100% Arizona wines.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Now, you've got 4 different tasting rooms now that are all sort of different concepts. When you set out at the beginning, did you see yourself as having such a significant hospitality operation?
No, but I think it just became an essential thing to, again, put Arizona on the map when you have context. Going into tasting rooms are great. And if you really can, well, if you're just going out to have wine in a beautiful setting, then you have a designated driver and you just go crazy and have some wine. But I kind of like the connection of the wine with the cuisine, that experience, and really understanding region. So we started growing our own stuff. We have ducks, we have orchards, we have gardens, greenhouses. So we're trying to present as much as we can, give you an Arizona experience. It might not be 100%, but we come as close as we can to presenting you, what basil and what, what flour, what grains and flour for pastas and breads. Arizona grains. What's that taste like? Even down to the dessert, the gelatos are flavored with herbs and things from our greenhouses and gardens, and made with Arizona dairy.
What made you decide to establish the winemaking cooperative, 48 Wineworks?
Talent pool. We saw a lot of people that were very interested in making wine, and maybe they had some skills. They were going through the Southwest Wine Center to get certification for, get their associate's degree in viticulture, winemaking, and but a lot of them are just underfunded. So they weren't going to go anywhere. They were just going to end up working for somebody else rather than actually paving their own way. So we established the what they call an alternating proprietorship called the 48 Wineworks. Just basically, it's a leg up. We have the press, the forklift, the destemmer, the glycol system, the chilling unit for the building all in place. And you're just paying a fee to basically make your own wine without having to buy all that infrastructure.
And that's working out well for the tenants?
Yeah, one of the people that was completely out of the nest and on their own now, Chris Potier and Joe Béchard, they were tenants as well as winemakers on site for us. They are now have their own facility. They've had it for several years now, Chateau Tumbleweed, and Chris is the president of the Arizona Wine Growers Association. So, job well done.
Now, what about American wine? Were you already a fan of sort of the real celebrated regions in California?
Yeah, a little bit. I think I gravitated more once I kind of went through my Australian introduction to wines. I think my palate quickly adjusted to kind of gravitating towards Italian wines. But there are some regions and some grapes in California that I do respond to. I like the expressions of Syrahs from the Paso Robles region. But yeah, more so European.
Penfolds is actually launching its first Californian wines in the next few weeks. I don't know whether you're across that.
Yeah, I'd heard about it. I forgot about it. Thank you for reminding me.
I read that Australia and Canada are the only countries where your wines are available outside of the USA. Is that still the case?
Yeah, it's really hard to get into UK and Europe, European Union. Because a lot of people are trying to get us in there. I was like, okay, I guess we'll try. But there's so much wine being produced in those regions that a lot of the distributors don't really want to take us on. They don't really have any interest, even though they're pretty sure they could sell it. It just, I don't know. They kind of look at it as a novelty more than anything. The guy from the rock bands is making wine.
Is that something you've butted your head up against
Yeah.
over your winemaking career?
Yeah, absolutely. You mean the musician thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, I mean all of it. Like it's like triple threat because I'm picking things a lot earlier and extended macerating things longer, doing a lot of wild ferments. On top of being in Arizona, on top of being the rock guy that surely isn't making his own wine. Surely some Oompa Loompas are doing that for him.
Yeah.
That is not the case.
Yeah, and seeing the kind of everything that surrounds you when you go and promote the winery, the Doco Blood into Wine, which I've seen. I can see that it might sell some wine, but there would be some, it's a double-edged sword for sure. Yeah,
because people are, that you're going to have people that are just kind of the looky-loos that just want the bottle for, they're going to keep it on the top of their refrigerator till it turns into vinegar, but they won't open it. But when they do open it, it'll suck because they stored it incorrectly. Or you have the people that are very much into wine and dismissive because they don't believe in Arizona. They don't believe in me as a winemaker. And that's fine. We're doing well. I don't care about those people.
And you've broken some of that down over the years, surely, just by being consistent and improving as you go along?
Yeah. I think that really is what it comes down to is if I'm not totally into it, it's not my job to convince them that I am. I just have to do what I'm doing and find our audience and just keep improving.
Any scepticism about Maynard's winemaking venture doesn't seem to be impacting upon sales. All tiers of his wine club, the Velvet Slippers Club, are currently fully subscribed, and the winery's website says it is not currently open to new distribution opportunities overseas.
Some of those distributors are like, well, what's your productions? Because if we take you on, what are we going to get? And we're like, oh, shit. We're right around, we're hovering around 9,000 cases. So yeah, that would be an issue for somebody who wants to really go balls out distributing you.
Yet you're the biggest vineyard holder in Arizona. Is that correct?
No, there's a couple people that have more acreage than I do. I think overall, I am definitely one of the people that has probably top 5 as far as acres under vine, for sure.
Which probably speaks to, if it's 9,000 cases, that's very much a boutique winery. That probably speaks to the boutique nature of production in Arizona.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that's a good sweet spot. There's some things we could increase volume on, I suppose, effortlessly without compromising the quality. It's just that, remaining present through those wines, through their journey, without letting anything slip off the rails. And 9,000, I feel like 9,000 cases is kind of a sweet spot for that, for me.
Are we drinking enough of your wine in Australia?
I think, we have some distribution there, so I think so. Again, like I'm making wines far more like Ochota barrels than I am Penfolds, for sure. We're a lighter, more restrained alcohol, not as much extraction, but there's a lot of elegance and subtlety that comes with our wines. So I think if you're a 90s Australian wine drinker, you'll think ours tastes like water. We're a lot lighter approach.
I've read there's a bit of a movement happening with fortifieds in Arizona. Is that something you're going to try your hand at?
Yeah, I've had stuff in barrels since 2013, 2014. I've been doing a tawny. So every year we'll do a little bit of fortified, focusing on Malvasia Bianca. So kind of a Madeira, kind of port-like wine. Every year, just adding it in. We'll pull everything out of barrel and remix it and put it back in barrel. It's an interesting process. Just navigating that sweet spot of when to interrupt the fermentation and how much of the spirits to add to get it right. It's, I feel like on a seesaw, and I keep going the wrong way and spilling my pies, like on the circus.
A steep learning curve.
Yeah, it really is. It's a subtle one, but I think we got it right. 3 years ago, we kind of nailed it, and we've been just kind of focusing on that approach now for the fortifieds.
Which other wines that are currently in development are you really excited about?
Well, Sagrantino, just like everything about that grape in our region up in northern Arizona, there's something very interesting coming out of that grape up here. Same thing with Nebbiolo and Barbera. And we're finding some of our workhorses are the Monastrell and Garnachas, very versatile. There's so many different things you can do with those grapes, various approaches. So I think as far as backbone and structure, every region's kind of looking, what's that thing that we can pay the bills with, keep the lights on, make it, something that's going to be delicious or ageable, out of the gate or something. I think a lot of those grapes end up being, for us, so far, for me, as a producer, Barbera, Garnacha, and Monastrell kind of seem to be that backbone along with Malvasia Bianca.
Now, while I've got you there, congratulations on the new Puscifer album, Existential Reckoning, which came out late last year. It seems to have been really well received. Yeah,
Matt Mitchell and Karina Round are my partners in that. They knocked it out of the park. Really, really, really excited about that record. They're just great. They're just solid, and it's just an honor to work with those guys.
Releasing a new album must be a little bit like releasing a new wine. You know when you think you've got something special in the can, but then you have to put it out there and see what people think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that can be daunting, but at the same time, when you have a track record of caring and doing things in a thoughtful manner, I think people they get that. So rather than judging things based on what they know or what they think they know, we've established an audience that's listening to the thing in front of them, tasting the wine in front of them, and evaluating it based on what they're experiencing rather than comparing it to some other experience. So I think we've kind of developed that. People are open-minded and ready for the journey.
Tango, apocalyptical.
Existential Reckoning was written well before the pandemic hit in early 2020. But with track titles like Apocalyptical, the album's themes have turned out to be strangely appropriate to current times. The album title, Existential Reckoning, first track, Apocalyptical. I can't be the first person who's said to you that it's turned out to be thematically very well suited to 2020.
Yeah. I took some online courses in reading crystal balls and becoming a wizard. I'm just waiting on my staff and cape. No, I don't know. I just one of those. I feel like just human experience in general. There's just patterns of things, and there's phrases that resonate on that level of almost in an archetypal way. And I tend to write that way anyway. I would love to take credit for having predicted a bunch of stuff. But truth is, it's just human experience, and you're expressing in a way that is flexible in interpretation.
You must have had a lot more opportunity to focus on wine last year than you would have anticipated, just probably spending more time in Arizona than you would otherwise have done. Yeah.
And actually, that's why we've dove into. Well, initially, I kind of dove into it a couple years ago, but I have orchards as well here with apples. So we made our first cider 3 years ago. And again, it says that, okay, well, if I can ferment grapes, what happens when I try my hand at cider, and how is that different? And like I said, we're working with mead. There's a meadery in Arizona called Superstition, and they have a bunch of really cool stuff, but they have like 30 different things, and a lot of them are like blueberry tutti frutti mead and bourbon barrel smoked tamale mead. I don't know, there's just so many flavors, and the one that I liked most that they did was just a straight honey mead, right? Just straight honey, no flavoring. And so we tried our hand at that, and I think the time that we've had this year has afforded me that luxury of being able to just kind of focus on babysitting something like that. Otherwise, I'd be on the road and I wouldn't be able to kind of experiment in that way. So it's been good. Spend time with the family, spend time in the gardens and the orchards, and experiment with other things, and really be able to tap into the process. Normally, I get everything to the barrel. I go on tour. I come back 2 months later and check in on things and top up barrels and taste things as we go. But I've actually been able to do it like every other week, every month or so, to kind of go back through and test things to see where they are. It's a blessing.
And it must be informative just having having more focus on seeing how things change and develop.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a double-edged sword too, because if you're overthinking it and you're not used to tasting it in that stage, and you start panicking and calling all your friends, what did I do to this wine? And they're like, it's December, shut up and go to bed.
It'll come good.
Yeah.
What apples have you got there? Are they eating apple varieties, or have you got some sort of heritage cider apple varieties there?
I honestly don't have a clue. We have like 6 different varieties planted of trees, and I just grab them all and we shred them. We do the applesauce method, so we shred them and ferment it on the actual must. And I learned the hard way the first time trying to press that. That was an absolute circus. We have a bladder press, and so it was just zzz, like the applesauce is spitting across the room. That was dumb. We figured
Making
that
a mess.
we learned quickly on that one. But I just take all of them and blend them together, and we shred them, and I just do punch downs just like you would the grapes every day. They oxidize very quickly, so you have to really just pay attention. There's just a lot of nuances that are different than the grapes you have to pay attention to. But so far, so good. We do a bone dry cider, a nice acidic, food-friendly cider there's no residual sugar in it at all, and very well received with cider geeks.
Now, I guess, even though you got a new album out, touring is probably off the agenda for the time being.
Yeah, that's definitely putting a dent in our promotion of this album. But we're flexible, we're resilient, and we're adaptable. So we did a pay-per-view event on October 30th, and we're now planning on doing several of those. So that's your version of touring, is just being able to get together, figure out a show, shoot it, edit it, and then put it up.
We've got COVID pretty much licked down here, so maybe you could come down here. We've just got to find somewhere nice for you to quarantine for 2 weeks when you get down.
You don't want us down there.
We've had you before.
I know, but just Americans and their COVID. Yeah, don't invite us. Just let us marinate in these mistakes we make, and then we'll see you soon.
Well, there's a lot of professional tennis players as we speak, locked in hotel rooms in Melbourne ahead of the Australian Open.
Yeah, because a lot of people are getting tested here, but they're getting the antigen test, which is not quite as accurate as really digging to the back of your skull and really finding out for real. And so people, I'm negative, and they're not.
It's been such a weird 12 months, and you've mentioned how it's freed you up to do some things around the winery. Do you think it will kind of inspire, creativity and writing, just living through this really unique event?
I don't know. I'm sure that it's marinating in the background somewhere, and I'll probably come up with something eventually. But having put out 4 albums in 5 years, I think I might need a little bit of a break on that.
The well's dry.
Well, not dry. I don't want to make it dry. Leave a little bit in there to kind of build on. So yeah, absolutely. There's so much. I mean, just as a fan or just as a viewer, human trudging through the digital universe, the memes and the comedy that's come out of this last couple of years with this administration has been glorious. A seemingly endless cornucopia of good jokes online.
Sanctimonious, phony little shit you can drop. The fake and front pompous ass. Heard it all before.
Well, there has to be some upside, doesn't there?
Yeah. That's all I can. Spending time with the family, being able to focus more on the wine, getting some good jokes. I just keep those blinders. Just keep those blinders on and focus on that.
What else do you drink when you're not drinking wine? You've mentioned the cider and mead projects, but are you a beer or spirits guy at all?
I'll drink. We'll have a friend who's has a team of people doing tequila, reposado tequila. I'm a fan of whiskey, but generally speaking, I'm we're just drinking wine and lower alcohol stuff like that. But I am absolutely a fan of a good Kentucky bourbon or a good reposado tequila.
Nice. Well, Maynard, thanks so much for taking the time to have a chat with us on the Drinks Adventures podcast, and best of luck with everything in 2021.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
The Drinks Adventures podcast is produced by me, James Atkinson, with additional production and mixing by Dave Robertson. You can find complete transcripts, links, and other information on the show at drinksadventures.com.au. You can follow me on all social media platforms at @ByJamesAtkinson, like my Facebook page, James Atkinson Drinks Adventures, to be kept informed of podcast giveaways and other news about the show. The Drinks Adventures podcast needs your support as listeners. Please do us a favour and leave an honest review and rating for the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher. We love hearing your feedback, and it helps inform other people this is a show worth listening to. Or simply drop us a line at hello@drinksadventures.com.au.